because obviously I became introduced to you through the work of the film that you had worked on with Chad Law and the Getback. That was a film that more or less got me introduced to you from the beginning. There. So when I mentioned in the review when I spoke with you when I talked about the film, I meant to say, and then speaking with you after the fact when we were messaging back and forth, that I loved what you guys had done with that film. Now, I'm not sure the relationship as far as like how more or less you got involved into this with the making of the film, and then how much input you had in the overall project here. Because there's two things that crossed my mind that I remember. I didn't think about bringing it up in the review, but I was curious about, because when I looked into your filmography after the fact, I noticed a lot of the work you've done here. It's mostly through the horror genre, but it's also like regional pieces, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So when it came to the writing, I'm not sure if there was something that Chad had reached out to you, or if it was something that was brought to your attention to see if you were interested in pursuing the project, and then what kind of ideas you had to flesh out the story. But because it's an American piece, I'm not sure, because it's a silly question for me to ask, I think, but I'm actually really curious about this, because there's something that I picked up on in the last couple of years when it came to writers writing pieces, when it comes to various regions, whether it be here in the States or across some other parts of the world, that there's one thing I always forget to realize, is that if you're not from those respective areas, it can be a very tough thing to kind of figure out, the cadences of the way the person may talk and so on and so forth. So I'm sure that I'm implying that here with you, but I'm actually just curious about, because, you have been mostly associated with one type of genre and coming out into more or less the action genre here. I'm not sure, again, what exactly you had, what ideas you had to help with Chad in creating the story. And then at the end of the day, when it came to the dialogue as well, too, I'm wondering like how much of that you had an influence over here, or was that all Chad and you just came up with the structure of the story to kind of flesh out certain details that to make the story what it is now in the final cut that we got with that movie there. So I hope you don't mind the long question, but I hope you understand why I wanted more to start off with there with you, because I'm actually very curious about that thought process for yourself, and then kind of get an idea of where we can go from there.
Yeah. Well, the horror thing, I've always wanted to write a bit of everything, to be honest with you. It did just happen. The first film was a horror film. And then everybody wanted the darker side of stuff. Luckily, in my free time, I'd been writing lots of action stuff because I enjoy doing it. And it's something in common with Chad. We both like the fun aspect of action films. Getting involved with Chad, that goes back maybe 5 years. And I sent him an email. I'd watched a few films written by him. And I don't know why, but I'd watched one and I thought, I wonder who produced this. And I went on and Chad was the producer. It was the first time. Never thought to look at who'd written it at that time. So I just dropped him a message on Instagram. Oh, if you're ever looking for a writer, give me a shout. His reply was, if I let you write, what will I do? And then I realized what I'd done. So it was like, well, I'm looking for, I started trying to cover it up. And well, if you're looking for a co-writer, and luckily we just kept in touch for those intermittent 5 years, I'd say I'd watched something, and he was always kind of interested that if films came out in the UK, they'd sometimes change the title, or it'd have slightly different credits. I'd send him a little picture while I was watching it, and he'd be like, oh yeah, that's different. And we just kept in touch, and then it'll have been during the lockdown on COVID. He got back in touch and said, would you like to work on something? And I was like, yeah, please, of course, still keen. And he sent me a list of maybe 6 ideas, and they were literally 1 paragraph ideas, and just pick one. Surprisingly, the first one wasn't the Getback. We have done 3 or 4 others that are waiting to go into production. It just happens the Getback was the second one to go into production. Lights Out is coming out soon, but that went into production first, surprisingly. So yeah, we've just been working together, and like you say, I mean, I'm very lucky in that if I'm writing something, I'll try to make it as regional as I can. So if it's an American, I try to take on all the spellings, a little bit of the language. And then with Chad, it has literally been a back and forth. We do the same thing through the idea. From the 1 paragraph, I'll sort of say, well, what about this? And flesh it out a little bit. And he'll be like, yeah, good idea. and then he might question a couple of bits, add a couple of ideas in of it, and by the time we've finished, we've got a decent fleshed out idea for one project, and then we start the writing in the same sort of way. Really, I'll go through, do a very rough first draft, and sort of say, right, there you go, what do you, and he will then go through it, and it's just amazing. It literally does end up this 50-50 split of both minds together coming up with a whole. And again, we're going back to the Getback. There's like so many films we'll end up saying, oh, well, you know, go and watch The Gauntlet with Clint Eastwood. Go and watch 48 Hours. Can't remember the other one we watched. One with Robert De Niro and Grodin.
What was
and
it?
it was surprising.
Oh, you're talking about oh, I know what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
it was also on
and
Netflix
it was the first
too. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Something Wrong.
Yeah,
and it was the first time I'd ever seen this film. Cannot believe I'd never watched it before. But as we watch the films, they get us in the frame of mind for the fun kind of movie we want to do, and we do feel that we did hit the mark with what we wanted to do with the Getback. You've got your characters, they don't get along, but there was a relationship there even when they didn't. And as they do get along better and better, the dialogue starts to flow better. And it was a good experience.
When you finally got when the film started going to production, I'm not sure how much of the film you were able to see as far as behind the scenes, or if you were able to see a cut of the film prior to the final cut that's out now for people to check out here. But when you started to see everything kind of more or less be put together there, were you confident with what you guys had put together? Because obviously for some people it can vary across the board when it comes to seeing an initial cut. Obviously there has to be some fine tuning, but in some cases you almost get an instant reaction where you realize that this is really good. Obviously we're going to fine tune some things, but we know we've got something really, really good. Or if it's a situation where you realize that it's okay, but once we start putting it together, I can see the outcome where it can turn out to be even better than we anticipated. So I'm curious to see what your perspective was on that in that film being put together towards the end there.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing we see is that obviously what we put down on paper as this is the film we would really like to see made. I would say for the Getback, we got a good 90% of what we would have loved to have seen on the screen. Okay. And then obviously people come back and it is nearly always the budgetary constraints of, can we just cut this down a little bit? Obviously, having watched The Gauntlet, we would have loved a big Gauntlet type ending. Before Mulroney's character turned up. We wanted a bit of a car going round an underground car park with a load of coppers shooting them. And it just was never going to happen but then we get the chance to sit down and rewrite it and make it the smaller to suit the budget. So we still get to do what we wanted to do. It's like you get that chance to do your second choice. I have worked on other films where they have just rewritten the end without any input, and then you sit down and watch the film and think, "Whoa, what have they done?"
So I want to ask you about this real quickly, because you actually mentioned something that actually caught my attention when it comes to. So for screenwriters, this is something I think a lot of people may not realize, that I've come to learn in the years of learning more about cinema, the behind the scenes. But there's a part of the industry when it comes with writers now where sometimes people will say the script is horrible, but then when you come to find out that the screenwriter actually wrote a good script, what had happened was the studio had interfered or the producers had come in and made these changes, and obviously for legalities the writers are still getting credit for it, but the changes that were made had nothing to do with them at all. But yet they're the ones that are stuck with the credit of like, well, you wrote the script. Well, that's not the script that I wrote. I wrote this, and they changed all this stuff here. So I'm asking you about that for yourself, because it seems like with the Getback, you and Chad almost had full reins about what you guys wanted to put into it here? I mean, you mentioned 90% of it is what you wanted to see.
Yeah.
And the things you had to change were just because of budgetary constraints there. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you guys put in what you wanted to put in there.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the work that you turn in and they say, we love it. And then they say that, and then all of a sudden they make the changes despite the fact that they said we approve it. And then they still say, well, we can't do these things. But you already knew that ahead of time, but yet you still made those changes regardless. Why bother in the first place? For yourself, when you start experiencing that for the very first time and then going through it through all these years, I would still imagine you still experience that to a degree. I'm not sure how you develop more or less the callus, or if you have to prepare yourself each and every single time, because I'm sure it varies across the board on how you deal with that. Because when it comes to people blaming the script, but they don't know the whole story, I want to know how you feel about that when it comes to the work that you put in here, and yet it's being overlooked as something that they blame you for as a starting point for the blueprint, and yet everyone else behind the scenes changed despite your efforts and what you intended on making here.
I mean, like you've just said, you have to have that really thick skin,
right?
And you've got to grow it pretty quick, and it does. I've seen it's happened to me from very early on up until the later films, and at the beginning, yeah, it used to. You'd walk away feeling you could feel quite upset about it, especially like you say when you hear reviews coming, and they come out and it'll be, oh, what was the screenwriter thinking? And then they list a scene and you're like, I didn't do that scene. Because once the film is out of your hands, that script, a lot of the time, the director can have ideas, the actor can have ideas, the producer can have ideas. And we've even found out recently that now distributors have ideas and start re-edit. I mean, when it comes to Welcome to Acapulco, that the film that people saw was not even the film the director handed in. So everybody can end up a little bit disappointed,
right,
if they don't get that thick skin. But on the days when, like the Getback, when it does really work, you sit there and you watch that first screening, and if your own work can make you smile and laugh a little bit and get excited, you think, yeah, everybody's done their job right. And you just hope that happens more often than not.
So working with Chad, though, because Chad is a very interesting person when it comes to the work that he involves himself with. I think it's very rare that he's ever gone to a position where he's not going to be able to be overseeing a production that he's either producing or writing on.
Yeah.
When it comes to the films that he's a part of here. But when you worked with him, though, was there anything in particular about him that you had learned from that experience and working on the Getback and the various other projects you guys are also working on to start off here, that was very integral for you, that made you realize that the changes that you think you realize you need to make for yourself, apart from the not just from the screenwriting standpoint, but more or less from like the business side of it, for how you as a screenwriter looking over a project that maybe right now you won't have any major input in, but coming from a point where you have to work yourself from the ground up again. But Chad seems like he got really lucky where he got involved almost from the very beginning, and it just took off from there. So now almost every project he's worked on, he's pretty much hands-on, with the rare exception that he's not. But from that experience with him, I'm wondering what has changed for you in what you have seen him do, what you've learned from him, or maybe not from him direct, but maybe from the production of the Getback, from various people you work with, that made you realize that this is what I need to change for myself moving forward from here.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, Chad, I take my hat off to him that, like you say, he keeps that involvement with every film. And I think it shows with the finished products. You can see where he's gone, and when you can, if you'll have spoken to him as well, you can tell when he's not 100% happy with something and when he is, which is great. And yet, moving away from it, I've got a couple of other projects that have been sat in development hell for quite a while with different producers, where I have basically handed it over, signed an option, and let them run with it for a year doing their thing. No real communication. Now it's all sort of gone with we're setting off again from scratch with a fresh option.
Right.
And it's like, I'm more finger on the pulse, and it's harder because I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere in UK. So it's not like I can just but I'm doing my best.
Right.
It's emails, phone calls, and really trying to have that involvement early on. And like you say, it's even down to the thing of being able to having that little bit of input and telling people, look, I think this person would be good in a role when it comes to casting and things like that. Chad's really good on knowing who he wants, and he walks in with in his head. He's got a list of this is my number one choice, number two,
Right.
and yeah, this I'm moving on with a couple. I'm still doing projects with Chad. We've got plenty more to come, but I've got a couple boiling in the background as well. And yeah, I've suddenly become a lot more wanting to be involved, wanting to know what's happening, where you stood, that being stood back and just waiting for somebody to hand you a finished film and say, do you like it? That's when you end up saying, well, no, it could have been better. That's, when I had it in my head when I was writing it, what's in my head was better than what you've put on the screen. Mm-hmm. I don't want that to happen anymore. And the Getback, when I first saw it, I can remember having the conversation with Chad and saying at that point in time, it was probably one of out of everything I'd done, the one I was the happiest with. So it's like wanting to be able to take that feeling forward.
When you look, so are you the type of person that goes back and revisits films that you have worked on, whether it just be solely on a screenwriting standpoint, but do you ever go back to revisit your work? Because I've met quite a few people in this industry, whether it be for music, films, comedy, whatever the case may be, just people who create stuff. And the most consistent thing that I hear from a lot of people when it comes to their work is that they don't necessarily go back and revisit it. They just do it. They may check it out once or twice, unless they have to work on it. Where, like in this case, like a filmmaker, they have to revisit it over those reasons there. But once the project is said and done, I mean, it sounds like to me, just from what you're describing about your experience in watching The Getback, that's a film that you probably would be happy to go back and revisit and watch, and then, or just, if someone says, "Hey, I'm watching your movie that you wrote, The Getback. I would like for you to sit with me and watch it and tell me some things that you guys have done film together." And that I'm sure you'd be very happy to do that.
Oh yeah.
When you work on another movie that let's say you were not happy with, and then someone says to you, I want you to watch this movie here with me and tell me about the experiences you made. And you think, I don't want to do that. But outside of that, though, if you ever had the incentive to want to go back and revisit for whatever those reasons may be, but do you do that? And if you don't, I wonder why, for your reasons, why you don't do that for yourself.
I think the only, like you've said, there's certain films, there's only maybe one that I would, or two, that I wouldn't go back and watch because I don't think I would gain anything from watching them again. And they would be ones where other people had far too much input. So what ended up on the screen was nothing like what I wrote. So I just think I'm not going to gain anything from watching that. But going all the way back to Day of the Mummy, I would sit down and watch that again, just due to the fact that I know the budget was so micro budget, and I know it didn't get very good reviews, but it's one of them projects that I'm incredibly proud of because I know they made it for next to no money. In 14 days, they made a film, and making a film is hard work for anybody, no matter how bad the end product is. Nobody sets out to make a crap film. they all hope they're going to make a good film. And Day of the Mummy, it was one of them that it sort of sits in the middle. It's an unusual creature. Everything was there apart from the budget. If that film had have had a better budget, they'd have got a better cast, or they've at least got a bigger name in it, something like that. I mean, they did. I don't know how they got Danny Glover in that film, but still to this day, I just think they must have drugged him or something.
But do you think, though, that when you look at your career, though, at least up to this point right now, I mean, because I've talked to Will Kaufman recently, and he says something that I truly believe about what this industry is, which is that it's an endurance. You have to have the endurance to go through this business, where you have to. It's a very hard road. It's a very fickle business as well. Yeah. And I started to realize more and more that as much as I love mainstream, and believe me, I do, but I'm actually leaning more towards the indie makers now, because I've been very fortunate to talk with a lot of indie filmmakers that have made some incredible projects, and I'm thinking to myself that if they can do this quality of work and, with next to no budget and bring in quality actors with quality set pieces and with whatever the genre may be, and they bring it up to standard, why can't these major studios, for the most part, keep up with that? But, again, obviously the industry has changed a great deal now, whereas back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where you can throw in a name and that's enough to sell a film. Nowadays, it's very, very rare for that to happen unless you have a name actor in an IP property. But the fact of the matter is that, I think some people have pointed out before that there are not a lot of original ideas out there that are coming out. And I beg to differ. I think there's far too many ideas that are coming out that are originals that people are making, but no one is going out of the way to see. And sometimes they tend to be more towards like indie films. Whereas mainstream movies, it's clearly obvious as a business, but their idea is if this sells, that's what we're going to stick with here. Whereas indie makers and distribution companies say they have a little bit more leeway where we can make this movie as long as you put this actor in there, and that's enough to sell the film, and that's enough to cover the cost that we need to get what we need out there. But you talk about your experience working with Chad. I'm not sure if your approach has changed when it comes to screenwriting now, especially if you look at them when you're writing an idea and you're going to be talking with potential producers, investors, and you're realizing that in order for me to write this story that I want to write, the ideas that I have that are purely coming from a creative standpoint, it's not going to be enough for them to be invested with the project. So I have to find another idea, or maybe take this idea and add on these other supplements to be able to create a story that will get their interest and then hopefully get an investment from them, which in turn will then have other people interested to want to distribute the movie. So there is the business standpoint as well too that's also added to this, where Chad, I think right now, has got to the point where he's got that locked down, where he knows that these actors are good for these said part, and I have an action film that I know is going to work out really well because this is selling really well. I got an idea that I could put together here and get the right actors for these parts, and it almost seems like it's working very well for him for the most part, I would say. But for yourself now, are you coming in from more of a balanced act of creative and business, or is it more business than creativity? So I'm curious to hear about your perspective on that when it comes to your writing approach now, and then how you want to go about in selling the idea.
Yeah. I would say for me, the actual writing part of it now, for me, is still probably all creative. I literally just want to sit down and tell a story. And I always put it this way: as I'm writing a script, I see it playing out in my head. I don't see the words. It's like I'm watching the film for the first time. And if I enjoy it, I'm just thinking, that's it. I just write what I enjoy. So I'm very lucky again with Chad. He can offer 6 or 7 ideas, and I can pick out the ones I know I'm going to enjoy writing. So then I do still give it the whole creative side. Once it's finished, then you've got to start looking at the business side, and that's putting together things like, can you get a poster knocked up for it to at least represent what the story you've told. The hardest bit, I think, for most people is then doing this 1-page teaser and synopsis breakdown and it is that 1 page that then sells that film. When you first walk in, they read that 1 page. And like I say, look at the list of actors, that 1 page, and it's like, is that going to sell? Then they'll read your script, and hopefully the script is then creative enough to keep them going. It's one of these silly little stories. Years ago, just before they made Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, a friend of mine was going to audition for the villain in the part, so he'd got the script. It was a very early draft. It wasn't the film we saw. It was different, but he shouldn't have done, but he sent me it and said, here, have a read of this. He said, I just want to, and these words were, I want to show you how crap the big budget scripts are. And he sent me it, and when I was reading it, he'd explained to me, he says, just get to such and such page. He said, you'll know what I mean when I say they've written that action scene for producers. And literally it was a scene with the fighter plane when it blows up, and you got to it, and I mean, it was going to be I think it ended up being a PG movie anyway. Right. But when the plane blew up, they'd done it in all uppercase, and it was fucking boom in big bold letters. And it was like, it's just they love it. They've opened it, and it's like, that's the biggest explosion you can get on paper. And it was like, I cannot believe that worked. And I did write a couple of action scripts after that, and gunshots I intentionally did in uppercase, and people seem to think, oh, it's really action packed, and it's like,
Oh, that's so
you
interesting.
can't really read it like that. But yeah, cat fucking boom, best thing I've ever read.
But when you start to see that for yourself, though, does it start to, because it's clearly obvious to me that you're still motivated, but because this is a very hard business, I'm sure you've had your points where you realize that you thought enough is enough. You know, this is not going anywhere for me. I've got too many potential projects that seem very promising. I know are very promising, but they're never getting off the ground for whatever those reasons may be. But you know, I find the filmmakers out there. And when I say filmmakers, I'm talking about producers, the whole gang here. Um, but there are people out there who stay consistent. But the thing is that I've noticed that even some of the best actors out there, always don't always have a hit after hit when it comes to their work.
Yeah.
But they're still working despite that. And what's interesting for me though is that you find people that are still working that don't have the best resume, but somehow they're still able to get work. And it comes in varieties when it comes to the budget, people they work with, but they're still working. And I find those people to be the most interesting because they're not the most famous, but they're the ones that have been able to maintain themselves despite the hardships here. You, on the other hand, though, and this is one of the reasons why I want to talk to you is because I remember when I had messaged you that you had said that, you know, I work full time and then reach out to me by this point where I'm free. And it dawned on me where I started to realize that, well, you just wrote a script. And again, this is nothing unique to you, but I remember thinking at the time that you just wrote a script for a movie that I really did enjoy. And it seems like to me, the word of mouth from people that had seen the film so far was quite positive for the most part. Yeah. But at the same time, what I started to wonder as well, too, is that I was curious about the fact that because your name is attached to the project and there's good word of mouth for the film, I've seen some people post on social media that saw this movie, it was great, thank you, you know, so on and so forth. And I'm not sure if, you know, let's say for example, if Tubi or other actors that have seen the film that thought, I like this movie and I know who Chad is, but the other guy who wrote with him, Garry Charles, who's that guy? And then if there's any sort of interest that may have been developed along the way, just based off the reactions alone from the film, they've reached out, where someone may have reached out and said, we liked what you've done with this movie. We've talked with Chad. Chad said these things about you. And we have some ideas of projects that we think you'd be a best fit for to help write out these projects. Because one thing I noticed about the business as well, too, which is not uncommon, is that you wrote an action film. We want you to write action movies. Or, you know, you're almost stigmatizing that genre, which is not a bad thing, I would say. But I'm just curious about if anything has changed for you along the way since the film has come out, and if you notice there's a bit of momentum developing for yourself, maybe where it's not happening quickly, but maybe quicker than normally it has beforehand, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I haven't had anybody literally come to me personally yet and ask anything, obviously, but I think it is helping out with some of the other projects that I've got already on the boil. People are sort of now taking, instead of, oh, that's the guy, like you said, wrote a couple of cheap budget horror films a few years ago, they're sort of not looking at it that way. It's like, oh, this is, you know, you can, not a selling point as such, but obviously you and me have spoken about 6 Hours Away by Guillermo. And I think, because I've got maybe another 2 or 3 sat with him now, and there's 2 of them that are ones I've written personally and sort of said, right, I'd love to have a go at these. And he's sending them out. People are seeing on IMDb that, oh yeah, this guy is now doing films that people are saying good things about. And I think it helps get that the newer projects are getting over the desks rather than just stopping at the assistant's desk and not going any further. Because I think some of the earlier work that I had done, regardless of what I feel of the initial scripts, your end films, and obviously the lower the budget, you can't help the film not being what you want it to be. And people look at it and they'll go, yeah, you know, they made that. It doesn't look that good. And it's a shame because, like you said, I mean, some of The Day of the Mummy, I think it's back to being called 200 Degrees now, the one with, Okay, I remember the guy was in it, but that ended up being at the time it was very low budget. I think they made it for $120,000, and he's in a kiln, and it's getting hotter and hotter, and everybody sort of goes, "Oh, it's like a really poor man's Saw," and it was. That was exactly what it was. But at the time, it was like that was another aspect, like of when you look at a script, and I did loads of research on how heat affects the human body and how blisters would form, the brain would function, and literally all of that just got stripped out of the script. And it was like, oh no, we can't have the actor looking all like that by the end of the film. He's not going to want to wear that much makeup, and people don't want to see him looking that haggard. So at the end of this film, he walked out of a kiln and he'd literally just sweated. And that was it. They could have just called the film Sweat. But it's a shame. Because if they'd have just put that little bit added peril to it, that, oh, this kiln is going to kill him, but sadly, budget, it just never felt like he was in danger. He just took his jacket off and undid his tie. And it was like, no, there's a chance he's going to die.
Do you ever this is an interesting one for me to ask you, because you worked on several films that are lower budget here, but I'm not sure if you because when you started writing, obviously you're not going to be able to write a film and present to somebody and say, hey, I got an idea for a movie, but unless you have an agency that's behind you, that you're almost guaranteed to most likely get some interest for people that are going to want to invest millions of dollars into a project.
Yeah.
But when you're starting off here, you're obviously starting at the very bottom. But when you're presenting these ideas to somebody, and you mentioned before about the previous film that it's at $120,000 budgeted film. I'm not sure if you think on the terms of the budget when it comes to what can actually be pulled off with the budget. So, and this is the part that I'm always interested in hearing from writers, especially with writers, when they realize that you have a film they're going to write, it's going to be at a certain budget range. So the ideas that I have, I know I cannot execute with this story, but if I can trim down these ideas and point the direction of the budget to this area of the story that we know we can invest and be able to have the most impact, therefore it should work out. But then when you mentioned before that once the producers, whoever was involved, that look at that and say, well, the actor's not going to want to do this here, and instead we're going to go this direction instead, and changes everything here, then where does the money go at that point? But my question to you really is more about when you start to come up with these ideas, are you thinking in terms of budget as well too, or is it purely just coming from a creative standpoint? I want to see this, and then we'll figure out the budget later.
Yeah, especially since I've obviously been working with Chad, because obviously you work when you actually come into a project, and Chad's going to be in this. I will use Chad because he's the one I've been working with just recently, and he will sort of in his mind have a budget, and it'll be the thing we'll discuss right at the beginning. Yeah, we're going to be able to do this, and it's like, am I going to be able to have a helicopter? No, we can't have a helicopter. And I did the same thing with Guillermo, and it would be silly. All of a sudden, he'd ring up out of the blue, and Garry, we've got a helicopter, we can use it, and it's like, right, I'll ride it back in. So that's all. I can remember when we were doing Welcome to Acapulco, and we had one section that was a car chase, and they were filming in Acapulco. I was here in the UK, and I literally just got this email saying, can we change the car chase to a speedboat? Somebody said we can borrow one. So it was literally, yeah, how quick do you need it? It's like within the next 2 hours. So it was the whole, it changed the dialogue and everything, the whole concept and dynamic of that scene changed. And it was like your budget had suddenly gone up visually because somebody was willing to let you use a speedboat that you wouldn't have got otherwise. So sometimes it does work the other way, and you get that bit of luck as well.
Do you, when you look at the films now for yourself, especially when you, like, for example, I asked you before about you revisiting your work, but by the way things are looking for you right now, it seems like there has been some momentum for yourself when it comes to the interest that people are showing. Hey, because the Getback had come out, we saw the film, we liked it, and therefore you have some other people attached to your project. Guillermo, I even being an example, obviously Chad Law, where I'm sure their input has also influenced that as well too for you.
Yeah.
But when you think about, let's say for example, you talk about certain films that you had worked on before that you don't, you're not really happy to go revisit. But when you think about it though, now going through the experience you're going through, at least at this moment, do you feel more confident in the way things may be going for you right now, where you think that there's a possibility that slowly but surely there might be some headway for you to be able to actually have more creative input, and at the same time your influence will be shown in the project that you are going to be working on here, in the same way that Chad's influence has on his projects here? Do you feel like
Yeah.
that's going to be happening for yourself, and as time goes by, from the way that you things are going for you so far?
Yeah. I mean, two of the projects that I've got in development at the moment, well, one of them borderline pre-production, working with a director called George Marshall Rugi. And I met him a few years, only online, never, literally only ever spoke to him like we are now. We've never, ever met in person,
Okay.
but we've known each other now since long before COVID. And he's a second unit director, worked on Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, all the big action scenes. He's the guy. And I'd got talking to him through a friend of a friend. And it was in the run up to Christmas 2018. And I just said to him, we'd been talking for a while. And I said, look, would you mind having a look at one of the biggest budget scripts I've written? It's just for fun. I said, I wrote it for myself. It's not really for anybody to see, but would you have a read? I said, and all I want you to tell me is, am I wasting my time? And he read it over the Christmas holiday. And his first email back to me was, why has nobody ever read your work? And well, I don't know who to send it to for a start. I said, I literally, for the 90% of the time at that point, I said, I write for fun. I says, and he was just like, but when I get back to LA, would you mind if I start showing this script to people? And it did the rounds. We had varying degrees of interest, and we are just trying to roll it out again now. But if that ever got made, we're talking, you're talking up there with your sort of Mission Impossible size budgets. It would be a big budget film. So fingers are crossed. But I do have me and George. We are on the same level. So the creative input from the start has just been, obviously I've handed this script that was my vision. He's read it, and we've just had, since 2018, we are so much on the same page that if that film ever does get some kind of green light, yeah, I'll be flying over and we'll do something with it. But at the same time, we're working on a lower budget one called Proof of Evidence, which is more thriller based. And again, that's been from the word go. It's like, right, what about this actor? What about that actor? And the discussions on that have taken up hours and hours. But we did have it already again before COVID. It was going to start filming the week before all the lockdown came in, and it just killed it dead at that point in time. And while COVID was, obviously we then had the lockdown,
Right.
we lost the finances. Then eventually we lost the producer. So now we've literally in the last 3 months started from scratch with a new producer. Looks like we're just waiting for this sort of 4th of July weekend to get out of the way, and hopefully we'll have balls rolling again.
Do you think though, the way things are going right now in the industry, because I don't think it's an uncommon thing to see, but it seems like it's more prevalent now when it comes to the filmmakers that are more or less coming into the fold right now, especially when it comes to mainstream, when you have directors that have been in the industry in some capacity that are now working on major studio films, like for example, like Chad Stahelski, David Leitch being a prime example of that, where they were stunt coordinators and stuntmen, and then they became second unit directors, and they more or less kind of rose through the ranks. And then when John Wick was the film that they were working on, it was a very big gamble for them, but it wasn't a large budgeted movie to begin with. But it certainly was a film that wasn't cheap to make. But I remember, I'll never forget this interview that John Leguizamo had done, where he said that when I read the script of John Wick, it really wasn't like the most amazing script. It was just a pretty general story on paper. Just didn't have any flash to it. So we made the movie at a good time, but then when I went to the premiere and saw the movie, like the film that I saw was not the script that I read. Like the film looked so much better. I mean, it was the same story in the script, but
Yeah,
the imagery just wasn't there. It just seemed very
yeah,
basic on paper. But I'm starting to notice more and more that filmmakers are becoming a more aware of the aesthetics when it comes to what works and what doesn't work. Because I think as time has gone by, more or less the nerds that grew up watching this stuff
yeah,
and reading the comics and whatnot are becoming more or less like it's like the Quentin Tarantino school of art where they know what works for them and they're going to use that on
yeah,
their work and be able to make the films that they want to see. Obviously not
yeah,
without its hardships, of course, but it seems like this we're getting that more and more of these
yeah.
filmmakers that are coming out there, especially when it comes to the more mainstream film. You got like Christopher Nolan being a major example of that as well too. Of course, you also have guys like like I mentioned before, Chad Stahelski, David Leitch, and then you also have other filmmakers that are up and coming as well too that may not be like mainstream per se, but they definitely have more or less a mainstream input. Where you guys have like Robert, what's his name, the guy who did The Northman. I forgot his name here. I'm
Oh,
forgetting his name.
yeah,
Yeah, but so you have guys that are making these expensive films, but they aren't considered mainstream per se. They're not the films
yeah,
you would say watch this movie and you expect a large audience to go to them, but
yeah,
somehow they're able to get a lot of interest, and they're not
yeah.
cheap to make. They're very difficult to make as well
Oh,
too.
yeah.
But I'm starting to see that more and more along the way,
Mm.
where it's becoming more prevalent. So with that, and the reason I'm bringing this up here to you is because I'm seeing that, and then I'm looking over into the indie side of it as well, where you have filmmakers like Will Kaufman, Jesse V. Johnson, Brandon Slagle, Chad Law, for example.
Yeah,
You're seeing more filmmakers in more or less the indie side of it here too, that are having more influence in that side of the industry, where you're starting to realize that um, because you are happen to be in the same circles as they are, do you feel like that things are going to change for the better with filmmakers that are of that school of film, if you will, that are now more or less changing the trajectory, where the films that you want to see are the films they're also wanting to make as well too, and
yeah,
are also being made as well, where it's actually more of it, whereas before it seems like it's by a systematic approach, but now it seems like it's like we have more creative freedom now, where that is strange, of course, but we are able to make the films that we want to see, so long as we do within the guidelines that we set for ourselves here, and whoever else is helping with those investments here. So it's a long question. I apologize for that, but I'm hoping you understand why I want to lead to that with you, because I'm curious to see your perspective on that, and if you feel like it's starting to change for the better from your perspective.
definitely. Yeah. And
Okay.
like you said, I think especially with the indie side, obviously I do go and watch some of the bigger films that come out.
Right.
But I am tending to get, especially, I know Netflix, they're putting out a lot of films,
Yeah.
and you sit and watch them, and you'll go, "Oh, that was good." You don't tend to rewatch it though. When we were just on
Right.
about rewatching films,
Right.
you'll watch Red Notice being a prime example with Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson. I watched it. I said to people, I thoroughly enjoyed that film. I don't think I'd ever go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
It's but then the Getback, which it's crazy. I worked on that film. I was part of the team writing and making this film, so I knew what was coming. I could still watch that film 2 or 3 times, and it's almost like it's not even the style over substance. It's almost like there's some part of there's something missing, and I don't know if it's the fact that we're relying so much on CGI and computer generated stuff that's taking us out of the story, and they can do stuff so big that they forget to tell the story. They just show you eye candy, so at the end of it you're like, oh yeah, that was wonderful, but there was no story there was no heart. Whereas the stuff independent people are putting out, they haven't got the access to this massive budget, so we do have to rely on story, and that might mean that we end up with scenes with a lot more dialogue in. But as long as the dialogue's driving the story as important, interesting, funny, and witty, you've got your heart there. And I think that's where we're almost getting the indie films, or I feel it this way. And I mean, Chad did talk about it a few months ago. We're almost making the films now that were the blockbusters
Yeah.
back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So and it's just, and I think people are realizing that they're sort of thinking, oh yeah, sort of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I could have gone and watched this at the cinema. Now I'm watching it streaming. But wow, there's a story. There's characters that I like, and I'm not just drowning in the eye candy. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the eye candy is all you want. But big tub of popcorn, eye candy. Yeah, sometimes it works, but I do believe the indie side is going a little bit further than that, but with less money.
Do you think though that well, I guess my question to you now is that what, for yourself personally, what do you get the most satisfaction out of the whole process for you? Because I'm sure in the beginning when you just by writing a screenplay and then someone says, "I like what you wrote," I'm sure that's a great satisfaction you get. And it could be maybe from someone that is not involved in any way with the industry that just happened to read it, said this is really good. Or then when you send it to somebody and that has influence to say, we can probably get the start here, and they say, yes, we are very interested, I'm sure that definitely boosts up your confidence. But as time has gone by, I'm sure a lot of things has changed for you about where your satisfaction would come from when it comes to the work. So, for example, obviously, when you saw the Getback, you were very happy with the film. Yeah. There's a great satisfaction with that. But during that filmmaking process, where did you feel you got the most satisfaction when it comes to that whole the starting of it, the actual production itself, the editing process, and then before you got the final cut? Like, where was the most gratifying moment for you that you realized that this is why I love what I do?
Wow. I'd probably go with the fact it would be small bits of feedback that you get whilst it's in production, be it off an actor, and it might not even be one of the lead actors. It's amazing how many sort of smaller roles in these films you end up online friends with people like the guy that played Gus in the Getback.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So superb, and that was before I'd seen photographs. When I saw his performance, it was just like, wow, that was everything on paper personified. He just brought, that was for me one of the standout roles in that film. He just brought it to life. But then to get the feedback from him that, it was so much fun to do, the character was there, and it's such a small character. It's not even somebody that's got even though he did have a backstory that we might not know about. It was a clever use of a smaller character. Again, when they go to see the mum in the home with Alzheimer's, had a little conversation with her online, and that's an even smaller role, but she loved doing that role. And it was the fact that, wow, it's not even the Dermot Mulroney's doing the big roles. It's these people doing the small but important, just as important roles. Right. And they're saying to you online, thank you for writing that. That was, and it's those small things. And then obviously afterwards, as you've mentioned earlier, just people not even putting reviews up, but just dropping you a DM and saying, I watched such and such, really enjoyed it, thank you. For me, they're the high points. You just can't beat them.
Do you, when you started getting to the industry, because I've asked this question before with several people, but I'm actually curious to get your perspective on it, because when you first started screenwriting and then getting involved with some people to develop your projects here, did you come from purely from the standpoint of like, I want to do this because I'm passionate about it, or is it a little bit of more of like I hope I can get rich and famous for it as well too?
So I started writing at primary school because I loved doing it. I think I was about 9-10 years old, and I actually wrote a novel about a radioactive cream cake that went on the rampage. So even then I liked horror. Went on the rampage and wiped out a whole neighborhood. And it was just giving it to people. It was literally loads of different copies of it, all handwritten. Used to hand it out to friends. And I just loved it. And then I sort of carried on through school doing little things. When I got to doing my exams at high school, I can remember my teacher at the time, she says to me, if you keep writing the things you're writing, they're gonna fail you. It's like you're 15 years old, 16 years old, you're writing horrible sort of violence, gore, bad language. It's not in the curriculum. If you keep doing it, you're going to fail. And the exam piece was we had to choose one article from a newspaper and then write a story that we were there when the sort of thing
occurred.
behind the article happened.
Right.
And one of them was a fire in a nightclub. And well, I wrote that one. I never got that piece of work back, and I failed English. So, and then obviously I ended up going into engineering and got caught up in it, working down the coal mine for 13 years. And when they shut down and the redundancies were coming up, that's when I thought, right, I'm going to start writing again, because I'd like to think I could write and it be my job. That would be a dream come true. Still trying to get there, still working as an engineer, right, but I'm seeing the films come out, so I'm not complaining.
When you were doing more or less like the everyday workman, if you will, did you feel like you're getting drained a little bit of your artistry, where you started to realize that it's not? Because I guess I can relate to this from my perspective, where you do something for a while and you start to realize that something is missing, and then you come to a point where you realize that what's missing is that creative spark that excites you. In this case for you, it's writing. For me, it's always been about learning and talking, believe it or not. Yeah. And something about this for me personally really just it kind of gets the juices flowing for me, because the creativeness that I get from this here is not from like here's a good idea for a movie. It's not really from that, because I don't always believe that I had great ideas for movies. I always felt like if I was a producer, I'd probably be better at that than I would a storyteller. If that makes some sense. But the point I'm getting at is that for me, I figured out that once I started doing this, that a lot more of my I guess my creative juices, the creativity comes out more in a weird way through this. Because I like to find out the finer details about the way the person thinks, and that for me gets me very, very excited. Like I love hearing these finer details, because I'm not interested at all in asking questions like, "Well, how did you get started in the industry?" What's your that stuff is very boring to me personally. It's I find it redundant and boring, and there's nothing new about that at all when it comes to those questioning. Because I've come to learn that when you start to hopefully the person does their due diligence in preparing for what they're want to get into here, that it makes it interesting for the other person, and that excites me personally. Yeah. But I discovered that along the way for myself in actually doing this here, because I always had the inkling to want to do this here. But for yourself, on the other hand, for those 13 years of working a day-to-day job, did you start to feel a little bit of that draining feeling along the way, where you realize that if it wasn't for you losing the job, that you probably would have never gotten to this path here that you are right now?
Oh no, definitely not. I mean, while I was working down the pit, I did carry on writing, but it was always short stories and things like that. You never sort of push the boat out. And then obviously when I got made redundant, I started out. I thought at first I did the Heaven's Falling novels, which I sent you, and they were the first thing. So that was my first venture into writing. But it's amazing how time consuming it is writing novels. There's some authors out there, I do not know how they have that output that they do. Everybody from Stephen King down to M.R. Forbes, sci-fi writer that I've been reading, how he can churn out the amount of books he does. He must have that same spark when he gets doing the novels that I do when I'm doing the screenwriting. Because screenwriting I can do very fast. Novel writing, it was months. Those two books took months to write.
Did you find that process a little more arduous for yourself, for why it took so long as in comparison to your screenwriting approach?
I do not know what the difference was, because I enjoyed both.
Okay.
It just seemed that the novel writing, for some bizarre reason, just took so long. And they are two totally different ways of writing. Novel writing, it's you want as much detail, and it's all, and then all of a sudden you move to screenwriting that you've got to say everything in as fewer words as possible because it's all related to page count and screen time.
Right.
Whereas novel writing, it was more freer in a way because you could spend pages describing a room or a person, whereas you do it in a screenplay, you've got words and it's got to be done. It's paragraphs rather than pages. So I don't know why, but screenwriting, maybe because I've just always loved movies. I don't know.
What do you have is there a film for you that like made you realize that this is what I want to do? Like, is there a movie or maybe a show or maybe an actor that had made you realize that this is what I want to do, or it was something you discovered as time had gone by for you to come to that conclusion for yourself?
I think it is a mixture because I'd always enjoyed reading. That was the crazy thing. Again, going back to working down the coal mines, people would say, my work friends at the pit would say I was inherently lazy. I read loads of books. That is literally what I did. I was an electrician. All I had to do was make sure that conveyor belts full of coal kept running. If that conveyor belt was running, everybody was happy. I could read my book. And that's all I did. I just read hundreds of books, different genres, everything. And then when I was at home, I'm watching films, and I love films. And it just got to the point that I knew I wanted to write. I just didn't know what I wanted to write. So I don't think there's anything that ever jumped out at me as being that defining movie. And it would probably change. Even if I had a list, it'd be a list that changes. When people say, oh, top 10 films, right. I can never do it because the top 10 this week could be the top 10 different next week because I'll be in a different frame of mind. And it just changes. It's probably just this thing of everything I've ever watched. I've probably got every director, every writer, every actor from John Wayne through Clint Eastwood, Sylvester Stallone, all the way up to the sort of modern actors. I just have to thank them all, really, because I think everybody had an impact in some respect.
Do you have any ambition to move from screenwriting to, in this case, like producing, directing? Do you have any ambition to want to do that as well?
I'm not sure about directing, but I would definitely like to have more involvement and probably have a go at sort of your TV side of things. Okay. And get more involvement on that side. I've got 3 TV shows that I've got sort of all sat there in packs, ready to go. They are on IMDb through me and George. They've been pushed to the bottom of the list at the moment. But yeah, that's the kind of thing. There's one of them. It's a historical one based around British highwaymen like Dick Turpin and stuff like that, but to be done in the style of Spartacus. So a very violent look at, because it was a violent time. Everybody goes on about highwaymen, they were all gentlemen. Well, no, not all of them. But there's some really good stories it could make for fantastic TV.
Are you ever interested in like, for example, let's say if your career does very well to the point where you almost have a choice to do whatever you want, would you be more inclined to do more of your own original work, or if someone presents you like an IP, for example, like a comic book property for Marvel or DC, would you also be interested in doing something of that sort? Or again, are you more leaning towards like, I'd rather create these stories for myself and then go with that rather than taking on an IP that everyone knows and there's already different various iterations of that. Maybe we can try something different.
Yeah, I think the strange thing with me is I wouldn't have a problem with somebody else's IP, like say, especially some of the comic book stuff. But right. I'd probably, knowing the way I am, I'd want to go for something that people haven't heard of as much. So obviously, they'd sort of come to you and say, "Do you want to do? We're gonna try doing another Flash movie. Do you want to write the screenplay?" I don't know if that'd bother me, but then there's some lesser known comics that, yeah, somebody could come to me and say, "Do you want to do this?" And if I read it and it was like, whoa, then yeah, I'd be in ground level. Sign me up.
Okay, but do you have any ambition to because you talked about previously before about you have one script
Yeah,
that is the same level as like a Mission Impossible type of budget where
yeah,
you have ideas that are very grand, but
yeah.
when you start to look at the ideas you have, I think you may answer my question before, so forgive me if I'm asking this again, but are you thinking in terms of the budget as far as like if I do this idea, it's going to cost X amount of money, and I don't care, I'm going to go and do that. And the reason why I'm asking this here is because I'm wondering if you ever start to consider of the limitations that are going to be presented to you, because there are some people out there who write ideas and they're phenomenal, but then when they start presenting these ideas to people, they say, "Well, it's a great idea, but it's going to cost this much money, so we're not going to be able to pull it off here. So you have to trim back a lot of the stuff out." And then
No.
sometimes they're like, "I can't do that because in order for you to tell the story correctly, you have to tell it in this fashion
Oh yeah,
with this budget." So for yourself though, when you start and go there, for yourself and knowing that if I sell this idea, I know that if I go to this person, they're going to be able to possibly invest X amount of money, which will then get someone else to come in and invest an additional amount of money here too. But it's all going to be within the confines of X
yeah.
amount of dollars here. So when you go through that for yourself, I'm not sure if you when you started to do that, did you feel like that was a bit of a detriment for yourself, or is it one of those things? Well, it's a challenge, then therefore I got to figure out what works best within the confines that we have to pursue this story, if you will.
Yeah, it's gonna. Well, for this particular one, I mean, again, it's listed on IMDb. It's the Alexander Hansen one. It's on IMDb. Um, and yeah, it's that particular project is one of them that if somebody hasn't got the budget, they're going to read it and they wouldn't even go, "We're going to have to trim this." It's a period set piece. It's like it's a mixture between Sherlock Holmes and Mission Impossible and Kingsman. It's that kind of level of thing. So I know for if anybody reads it with a bit of steampunk, if anybody reads it and they sort of go, "Well, you're gonna have," I don't know what they'd trim on it. I think they'd just come back with a outright, "We can't do this," and I can fully understand that, and I will wait and see. And if nothing ever happens with it, then maybe I might even look at going a different route with it. We've been talking comic books. There's a few people I've met over the years that are in that industry. It might be something I take that way. Have a go at some writing within a different sort of arena, because I know the scripts for comic books, again, it's a new thing that I could learn, and it has been mentioned in the past. I've just not taken anybody up on it yet.
Do you feel like but the way things are changing right now in the industry, and I'm talking about the overall industry in itself, because there has been a major shift when it comes to how people are wanting to have certain stories told, but it's like, so for example, like, Hollywood, or not Hollywood, I meant to say, the I forgot the exact name of the organization, the Science Academy, the people that run the Oscars.
Yeah,
So they had recently announced about what the criteria are that need to be met in order for you to have your films nominated. So you have to have X amount of people of color in this film, and you have to have these type of. So it's basically they're changing the whole regime about what needs to be done, and I because I'm Hispanic, I guess I can say this here, but I'm not against it. But what I am concerned about here, honestly, from my perspective, and if you don't want to answer, I get it, but I just want to hear your perspective on this here too, that there is a shift and change when it comes to storytelling and how the story is being told, and then what you must do to meet those criteria in order for you to tell those stories that you want to tell. And
yeah,
I'm all for opportunities. So I'm not trying to give the impression that I don't want this out. I do, but at the same time, I'm starting to realize that there are some agendas that it seems to me that if you want this, you have to get this, this, and this. But but we are telling a story of this sort, but it may not fit for a person of this sort here. If we do that, then we have to change everything altogether here. So it's not going to work for the story. Not to say that I'm against it. It's just that I'm just against the fact that it changes everything. So if we have to do that, then I have another story we can tell. No, but we want that story. So if we want to make this film, therefore we have to meet those criteria for you to make this movie, even though we're changing the whole story, if that makes any sense. I hope I'm making sense when I'm saying that here, but I'm curious about your perspective on more or less how the industry has changed. And if you feel like that because it's changed, there are a lot more opportunities where an actor, a person of color that probably wouldn't get a leading role can now get the leading role that you thought, I've always wanted to tell this story, but I didn't want a white guy to be the lead. I want a person of color, because that to me is much more interesting, because they have a perspective that I think is very unique from their point of view that we can tell with this story. And now I can finally tell a story of that sort. But I'm also wondering too, if you ever think about it, well, because I'm a white guy, can I tell a story about a black guy doing this stuff here? So I'm not saying that's happening to you, but I'm just curious about how your perspective is when it comes to that. And if you feel like when it comes to the way the industry has changed, is there a part of you that's wondering, okay, before I thought this way, and now that I'm seeing the changes that are being made along the way here, these ideas that I had before may not work so well now because I looked at it from a different angle. Now that I have to look at it from a more broader perspective here, I'm having to change my perspective on telling the story from a side of the world, or whatever the case may be, that I'm not privy to, because I don't know anything about here. So I'm just curious about your perspective on that as a storyteller when it comes to creating these stories, and then how to go about and selling these ideas to distributors or producers, or whoever it is that you are wanting to get these stories out to, and they're telling you, we have to have these things before we can get this off the ground here.
Yeah. No, I can see where you're coming from, and you make total sense. I think, luckily, in a way, I didn't always have the broader mind. I have children that have grown up within a generation that have shown me how to be broader minded in the last 10, 15 years. And that has rolled over into my writing before, like you say. But I do see what you mean. There are points where I can be watching certain films, especially if they're made in certain time periods, where they've clearly gone for, right, we've got to tick the box of, we've got to have this nationality actor, this nationality, and this and that. And it's the wrong time period. That particular kind of person wouldn't have done that job, that task, in that period of time. It can affect the story a little bit, and it can affect people that are watching the film, because they start going, oh, and I know it's entertainment and it should be, but there are sort of the little things that it gets under their skin, and they're like, they wouldn't be doing that. But then from my point of view, I can see I've had the opposite thing with me, George and I. We do try to, as we're setting out, we like the idea of having that inclusion with, and not even maybe having to explain it. There's in Poe, we've got the lead character is a white guy. His wife is of Asian descent, but then they have two children that are different nationalities. The assumption is they're adopted. It's not even mentioned in the script, but George and I know that that's the kind of family dynamics that exist in the real world. Right. So it's like, it's acceptable. It maybe enriches the story a little bit because it'll make people think. On the other hand, I've had the sort of the opposite of effect. I've tried including, there was one I wrote not long back, and it's in development now. And one of the characters in it was trans, and it was the villain. I thought it was the coolest villain I have ever written. They weren't trans, they were actually non-gender in this one. I'm very sorry. But It was the coolest villain you've ever seen. It was a villain that, everybody just, wow, I want to be with this person. But they were so nasty. It was just like, it was the perfect villain, but they were, all the way through the script, they were referred to as gender neutral. And when I handed it in, it was, oh, you're going to have to change that. We can't have the villain as gender neutral because people will jump on it and say, oh, it's a hatred thing. And I'm like, no, it's the coolest character I've ever written. But we changed it. We actually took it out, and we made another character within the script who is on the side of good. We did make that, they said, make that character trans. We will be happy with that. So that was making a change the other way. And I tried to do it in a lot of scripts, just throw in, again, the smaller characters that they're not necessarily the leads, but you can enrich a character by just having one sentence where a female character might mention their wife. It's like it's not being thrown in anybody's face, but it's the world we live in.
Right.
And it's like, let's. But I think it's almost like a lot of producers going that far. They are still, even though there may be tick boxes, I think some of them are still a little bit scared of, it's a dodgy subject.
Right.
There's one script, again, sat on my IMDb in development, called Lipstick, Heels and a 45. And that's about a guy who ends up hiding out in a nightclub run by drag queens. And he helps them pull off a robbery if they help him keep hidden from the local mob. And again, I can remember my daughter actually said to me, she says, "You are a white male writing a film about a variety of gay people, including drag queens. One of them is transgender." She says, "There could be backlash." She said, "Because you aren't from you have nothing to do with that community." Right. So I literally ended up talking to people like from the drag community, Blair St. Clair, Peppermint, who is trans. I had a chat with all of them and told them my reasons for wanting to write this script, and got huge backing off everybody. And again, it was another one we were pushing before COVID, and it sort of got pushed under the radar. But I would so love to get it going again, just because, it's a film that it just hopefully opens people's eyes to the reality of the world we live in.
Do you feel though that with the story, like in this case, for example, you talked about these two scripts where you have some resistance. In case one of your daughter was pointing out before about that, well, you're a white guy who has no relations at all, no background with this particular community here, and you want to tell this story in this capacity here. And then you're talking to other people in the community saying, "Hey, I got the script here. Can you?" And then I'm gonna tell you my reasons for that. What do you think? And they're saying, "We love it." That's the general consensus I'm getting here.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting for me though is that you talk to somebody and you share the ideas. It almost seems as if though that the people that are rejecting, and I'm not trying to include your daughter into this mix, so I hope it doesn't come out the wrong way here. But when you're having someone who's telling you, "Yeah, it's not going to work because the climate has changed a little bit, where it's almost like a fear of, we're afraid that it's going to look bad, but we know you're not doing anything bad. It's just that it may come off the wrong ways, but you read the script and that's not the intention from what you read." I can understand if you said that the transgender character that I have written here was horrible, and then all of a sudden they get a beating at the end that's vicious, and I could see that coming off the wrong way.
Oh yeah,
we may come up that may send the wrong message here, but that's not the case here at all. But again, they're just afraid to take the overall approach because people's voices are now louder because of social media.
Yeah.
That being said, though, when you are starting to write ideas now for yourself, whether it be ideas that are kind of more or less pushing the boundaries, if you will, is there a little hesitation now coming from that because of what you've heard before, or are you just in the same position as, I'm going to write the best story that I can, and we'll see what people's reaction is at that point?
I think I will always go the route of what I feel is true to that story.
Right.
And then later on, and I've always said to people, when anything's at script level, everything is so easy to change. If you don't like that character, I can change a character. Going back to Alexander Hansen, I actually have 3 different versions of that script. There's one I call the vanilla version, which is he's just a white rich guy.
Right.
But then we had a version that was written where the character is an African child who's been adopted by a British lord and brought up. So the story is slightly different. And then there was a version where he's an Indian child that was adopted. Each one is slightly different to the other script, but the changes were so easy to make. I really, at one point, I can't even say who we were going to go for, but we did have an actor, and his agent was very keen, and the answers we kept getting were, "Look, we're just waiting on some news and we'll be able to tell you." And that said actor died, and it was like, that was just earth shattering. We really do believe at that point we would have, I'll tell you in private, but we would have got that actor, and that Alexander Hansen would probably have been made by now, and good or bad, we'd be getting the reviews. But it was, that was, heartbreaking for everybody that knew the guy. But it was just, at the time, it was just like, oh no.
Do you think though that now, by the way things are going here, in terms of more or less the because I'm curious to get your perspective on storytelling now, because again, initially when you first started coming up with these stories for yourself in the very beginning, writing short stories, and then getting to screenwriting, I'm sure there was no concerns about what will people think of the story that I'm writing here, because I'm right. But then as time has gone by, the climate has changed where, again, you are realizing that these stories now could have worked 10 years ago, maybe not so much now. And you more or less answered my question here, but I'm wondering now that, are you starting to notice for yourself when you're talking with Chad, when you're talking to various filmmakers out there, and you guys are writing a story, and then you start to realize that, well, if this guy is going this direction over here, something's up, because I have this idea and they're not really leaning towards that idea, because it's not in tune with the culture, if you will. And it's not something you're coming up with that's offensive to anybody, but I'm just curious about if you notice that there is almost like an instant reaction where this is what we're going to do, and we can't do this here, just so you know. So from now on, we're going to be going this direction here. Are you starting to see a little bit of that for yourself, more or less in behind the scenes, where people are coming up with these ideas, or they're giving you a set of ideas a set of guidelines rather, to say, we can do these type of stories, but the things we cannot do are X, Y, and Z?
Definitely. Not in every project, but right. I have had some projects where, and I won't mention the title or anything, but I do remember literally sitting down to write one script, and the rules were, right then, the country this script is based in, these people cannot be seen to do drugs, they cannot be seen to be into prostitution, they can't be seen to be using guns. Basically, you cannot show them in a bad light in any way, shape, or form. Every American or English person or European person that is visiting this country, they can do whatever they want. The people that live in this country can only be seen as the good guys, or not as the bad guys. And it was like, okay, it's understandable, but it's like, it can put a massive restraint on what you can and can't do. So
do you feel like it's a detriment though, with the way those standards are set, where you have ideas and the ideas are not intentionally to shine a negative light, but rather, again, to show more or less the realities of what the overall story is about, you want to tell, whether it be a heightened reality, but just show, hey, this is how it's like, but we're going to amp it up a little bit here. But the intention is not to make them look bad, but it's just show that that's what happens, and the bad guys are not these guys, they're rather these people over here. So I'm just curious about if there's ever a part of you that starts to realize that, is it even worth it continuing this here? Because if there's all these restrictions in place, what's the point of me being able to tell a story that I want to tell that I can't even tell in the first place?
Yeah, I've got to admit, anything like that now, and if that's the situation, obviously if you find out well after you've signed any contract and you're kind of stuck, you've got to write it, you'll just do the best you can within them restrictions. If everything's on the table before I start, I have been known to sort of just say, it's not for me. It's, find somebody else that is going to have the enjoyment right in that particular style or whatever you want. But like you said, if it's going to be, and it's not so much lying about stuff, but it's just like, no, by putting restrictions on, we're taking it too far away from the truth, that I know I wouldn't believe it if I watched it. So how am I supposed to write what I don't believe? So I have been known to turn things down for that reason, and just for the fact that I wouldn't have fun writing it. There's some ideas that have been thrown at me, and it's like, well, there was it's like, no, it just wouldn't be fun. I would not enjoy writing it, so I'm not going to, which I did just turn one down, that the whole concept, there was too much the whole concept of the script was violence towards women, basically. And it was just like, I says, no, I says, I'm not going to go down that route. And I gave them 2 or 3 different ideas that I would be willing to do that would have encapsulated what they wanted. But it was like, oh, no, we want this. And it was just like, I said, no, I said, it's not going to work for me. I said, I'm not going to have fun writing about violence to women. I said, even if she comes out of it okay at the other end, it's just not going to work for me. So I walked away from that one. And I did walk away from one that an Indian guy wanted me to write once that was a lesbian ghost story. But I didn't know enough about the culture to write that story and make it work. But you could tell he had massive passion for it. I don't know if he ever did anything with it, but he knew. He was obviously talking about things he understood, how that culture is treated where he lived. And it was like, I says, I would have to come to India and just live there and soak it all in and know to write something that personal. So that was another one I turned down. So
has there ever been a project that you've worked on, whether one that got made or that was about to get made or was shown interest in, where you let's say you wrote down an idea and you thought it was a good idea, and then someone had said to you, it's a good idea, but we have to change X, Y, and Z, and then the changes that they were recommending or maybe just told you have to make, you actually realize that, you know what, that's actually even better than with what I had come up here. Have you ever had those experiences for yourself at all, where you thought that you had a good idea, someone says they're decent, but this is a better idea. We like the story, but we want to go this direction instead. And you realize that that's even better than what I thought of.
I would say I've had that come up a few times, even when, again, discussions with some of the ideas we've been backing and forward with Chad. He's suddenly just come out with something, and it's like, wow, yeah, that makes all the other little pieces fall into place. And again, with Guillermo, he's another one. He's sort of saying, oh, you know, what if we do this, this, and this? And it's like, yeah, brilliant. But again, when I'm working with Guillermo, most of the things that I am writing are based in Mexico. So, or on the border of Mexico. It's a world he knows better than I do. He can send me as many videos and photographs as he wants, but at the end of the day, when he can come back to me and sort of just say, oh, what if he did this? And it might only be a little thing. I'll have just written something down and it'll be one character, and he did it the other day. He said that one character is introduced too abruptly. They're just suddenly in the story. He said there's no reason for why, or to the audience anyway, why they are who they are. He says, what if you just do this, this, and this? And it was like, yeah, it's perfect. We're at the writing stage. It's literally 10 minutes work, but you've improved. That character now actually works better than he did 5 minutes ago.
Have you? What's the one project or that you worked on that challenged you the most, that you got the most satisfaction? Whether it be the film turned out good or not, but it's one thing you took on that made you realize that I'm actually getting better as a storyteller in this capacity here.
I would have to say, Welcome to Acapulco.
Okay,
but it was literally because you had me, the screenwriter, based in the UK. Your producers were, I think it was 5, maybe 6 different producers, and they were based all in different countries in Europe. And then we had Guillermo filming it in Mexico, and it was, you've got all these 6, you had producers with a lot of ideas, and they all wanted them in the same film. They didn't necessarily belong in the same film, but they're the guys with the money. You've got to give them what they want. And I can remember they were really secretive as well, where it was like, this is what we want. And I went away with all the notes, and it was only then I thought, there's no ending. They've not said how this film ends. So me being me, I've done the first draft, given them an ending, and it was like, that's not the ending we want. It's like, well, what ending do you want? And I'll write the ending. Well, not that one. But they still wouldn't tell me. So I wrote a second ending. All they said was it needed to be bigger. That was it, just bigger. So I did a second ending. And then they came back and said, no, That's not what we want. But it was like, obviously, you got 5 or 6 men. And then it was on the third time, it was like, oh, we've got this thing, and there's the seafront, and there's the waterfall. And it's all you had to do was tell me where you wanted to film it, and I could make it work. But they were like really secretive right up until the end. And you just had Zoom meetings with 5 and 6 people that ones later amongst all of us, it was a strange situation, one I've never been in before or since. But we came out with a film at the end, and I saw an early cut of that film that Guillermo showed me, and I can't remember what song it had, an Elvis song over it at the beginning, and my wife is a huge Elvis fan. She burst into tears. She just says, I don't care if you write anything else. You've had an Elvis song on one of your films. And then it went off to the distributors, who decided they wanted it to be funnier. And all I can think of is that I think the humour from the script got lost in the translation of different producers and the director. I just think everything got mixed up in a big mixing bowl, and the sense of humour the lines were there, they just weren't delivered to make them funny. But this early edit was still a fantastic thriller, well, an action thriller. And then it went to the distributors, and it came out, and I have to admit, I watched it once and I just couldn't watch it again. And I've been trying as hard as I can to get my hands on the early edit, so that's the one I could watch, but I've not been able to get older one. It's the one that came out. It's not a bad film, and like you say, people came to me and said, oh, really enjoyed it, had fun watching that. And it's like, oh, thank you. It's just, oh, I wish you'd seen this earlier edit. It was just so much better.
Is there a project that I guess my question is more towards like, is there something that you have not done yet that you really want to try that you think can really challenge you as a storyteller to make a movie that will more or less encompass as far as who you are as a storyteller, have your own more personal touches to it? Because I bring this up here is because I happen to come across with the movie The Channel, that's directed and wrote by Will Kaufman. To me, that's his best film. And you can tell it has his personality throughout the narrative from start to finish. Like that's his movie. And you can tell that the film that he had the most control of was in that film. And you can clearly see where he has gotten better as a storyteller. And it's a very straightforward narrative, but there's some nice little twists and turns, if you will, when it comes to the approach of the story that I really did appreciate. But again, that's a movie where I can look and I can say that's Will Kaufman through and through. But for you, on the other hand, I'm wondering if there's a project that you have yet to work on that you want to start off with, or that you believe is going to more or less be like when people see the film, they say that is a Gary Charles movie. Like I can see that is Gary through and through.
Blimey. I mean, if we based it on, and this is just some of the things I've got sat there. There's 2 films at the moment, and they are literally both sat with Guillermo, and I will be sort of, if we can get them going, I'll be very close to both of them, because they are both sort of ideas I've done from scratch. One's called Phoenix, and the other one's called Finding Jasmine. And the Finding Jasmine one, I would be very, very keen for everybody to see that film. I would love to see that film get made, because we had one producer read it, and he said, based on the title and the one page, he went in expecting one kind of film. He did not expect what he read. He said, I did not expect an action film in any way, shape, or form. He says, it was and it was like, well, that's the whole intention of that piece. So if you saw it in the script, I want to see it made as a film and see everybody else watch it and sort of think, wow, it starts off as one thing and becomes something else pretty quickly, but it's like it's not the film you expect, especially with a title like Finding Jasmine. It sounds like a romantic comedy, but it isn't.
Are you content with the way things are going for you right now, with regards to in this case, with the reaction, with the films you've been able to be a part of here so far, and more or less what's going on behind the scenes with the various projects you have up and coming here, that are some that are completed and are still in the process of getting out, some that are still being worked on that look very promising to actually get started and have a completion there.
Mm.
Are you content with how things are going for you right now in terms of your career at this moment, or are you at a point where you're still just taking it day by day, where you're not saying to yourself that this is going to be it for me, or maybe it is, but you're also very aware of the fact that, but it could all be taken away like that before I even know it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been chasing it for that long now. I would
Mhm.
just love for it to be the full-time job. I am at the closest I've ever been to that ever happening. And the thought of being able to get up and just think, right, today, all I've got to do is write, would be astounding. And if it does happen, people like Chad, Guillermo, George, I'll be having to sort of send them a little bit of money so they can buy themselves a drink as a thank you from me. Because at the moment, it is still so tough. And I don't think people realize how tough it is to be working 4 12-hour shifts and then 4 off. And it's like night shifts and day shifts. And then you've got to fit your writing into the 4 days off. And it doesn't always happen. I mean, I'm on my days off at the moment. I'm on the second day. I mean, not a lot of people know. I do mention it a little bit on Facebook. I had COVID 2020 October, and I've been suffering with long COVID ever since. I have good days, I have bad days.
Right.
So if it's a bad day on my day off, sometimes I can't write. I just the brain is not working. Right. So on the days I feel good, I've got to get it on paper. And with working and everything else, it is an absolute nightmare. The thought of just being able to focus on doing the thing you enjoy, just getting up and writing, being able to make the phone calls to people like Chad and, right, what are we doing next? And which we have just had one of those discussions, and I'm supposed to be starting one on this 4 off. So that's going to be my job tomorrow. Start writing.
I've started to ask this question somewhat lately when it came to because to kind of get a backstory here, I used to really care about legacy. I used to think that was such an important thing. And as I started to get older and doing this more often here, I don't really care about that anymore now. It's almost like it's almost like an afterthought, where I enjoy what I do, and I hope people do enjoy it as well too. But at the end of the day, I do this for me, if that makes any sense. Well, when I came to that conclusion for myself, I had asked this question before with Devaney Penn and a few other people as well too, where I wanted to get the perspective on what they feel like the concept of legacy means for them, and if they care about that, and if they don't, why they don't care about that. Because considering where you are right now at this point of your career when it comes to your screenwriting and the films you've worked on, and of course, everybody has, some work on the resume that they're not the most proud of here, but then there's always a few that stick out that they're very, very proud of, that they can look back and with great fond memories here. But then, at the end of the day, if something doesn't work out in your end, where let's say, people have lost interest in your work, despite the fact it was well received beforehand, and you're not getting the opportunities anymore. Now you're knowing for a fact that I am not going to be able to move forward with this career that I intended on here. So I'm going back to work here, and I'm okay with that. But what I left behind, I can look back with great memories here. And I'm wondering, if you think about if that were to happen, are you going to look back and think that if people were to look at my work, I hope they remember me for the following things here? Or do you not care at all about that for yourself, and you just think, I enjoyed my time, and that's all that mattered to me?
I think a little bit, mostly for me, that I write, most of my writing is for me. And I've always said, if only one person enjoys each thing that I've ever written, I've done the job. I've succeeded at the task that I set out to do. And I know there's always going to be more people that don't like what you do, but That's up to them. Everybody's got opinions. But yeah, if one person enjoys one project, then the job's done. Because the actual writing of them, whether the film's been good or bad, the actual writing, I've enjoyed every single one of them, writing them. It's even the tough ones, you've still had fun putting them on paper. So that's the great thing. And I've always said it with writing, I don't think anybody can ever retire from it, because you'll always do it for fun. You won't be able to help yourself. Even if nobody's reading it, you'll still think, oh, I've had an idea. So you'll write it. It'll be a short story. It might be a novella or a novel. Could be another screenplay. You might only show it to your friends in the future, or your missus, or just put it on Facebook or whatever and just say, here, have a read of this. But you'll never truly retire. So as long as you're still having the fun with it myself, I think I'd be happy.
All right. Well, so for the cameras, I want to say thank you again for your time here, because I was looking forward to chatting with you this, and I actually would love to have more conversation with you again in the future, especially with the upcoming project with 6 Hours Away, which is one that you have told me about in private as well. I'm actually really excited to see how that, because I actually happened to catch a few interviews where Guillermo was talking about that film since last year, and he seemed really hyped for that movie as well too.
Yeah,
when it came to the anticipation about getting started.
I know he's just seen a final edit of it, and he absolutely loved it. So
yeah, I'm having high hopes for that film as well, too, considering with what he has done with Welcome to Acapulco, and what else? He was also in that movie with Michael J. White. Their names escapes me. I think that's
the Good as Dead.
Good as Dead. Thank you. Yes, I saw that one as well, which I did enjoy.
I did.
But there's a lot of upcoming projects that that you've been able to share here. That just hearing your enthusiasm behind those particular projects, I'm really excited to see how they're going to turn out, especially after what I've come across with the Getback, which is a film I still love to this day. So I'm really happy that people have responded positively to the work. And I hope in time we'll give you more opportunities to continue on this path on a full-time basis. So for me, this is me giving your flowers, but I also want to say thank you again for your time, and again for the cameras. I want to say cheers to you.
And thank you for having me.
All right.